Hey guys, welcome to today's training on how to increase the lifetime value of your ideal clients. My name is Castner. I'm super stoked that you're here today, and I've got a number of things that we're going to be covering today. Just wanted to give you a high-level view of what to expect over the next few days. Today's training is actually part of a training series that is going to be released each day, once today, which is Monday, tomorrow, Wednesday, and then we're going to be wrapping the training series up in New York City. I'm actually traveling there on Thursday, so you'll definitely want to chime in for that event as well. So just wanted to give you a glimpse of what's happening around the bend, but today we're going to make sure you get a ton of information as it relates to increasing the lifetime value of your clientele. Now, for those of you who don't know me yet, or this is maybe a refresh, you're coming back into my world after not hanging out with me for a while, and thank you for joining me today. Believe it or not, I have been at this in some way, shape, or form, helping business owners and service providers find, connect, and convert more of their ideal clients for over 2 decades. I know I actually don't look the part, right? but truth be told, I have been doing this for quite some time now. So it's fascinating to know that when I started helping service providers really connect with their ideal client, it was in the retail world of things. And so I spent the first 11 years of my career in working for major retailers like Victoria's Secret, Lancome Cosmetics, Dillard's, and a number of other retailers. And then when I switched over into the service-based world back in 2005, it was a way different ball game. I didn't have the $1 million marketing campaigns that some of these bigger brands that I had represented were bringing to the table, right? So I now had to go out there and find clients. I had to pound the pavement and talk about the companies that I now represented. And I didn't necessarily have the luxury of having the billboard of that company tattooed across my forehead. So I know for a lot of you in the service-based world, you might have small budgets that you're working with to grab your clients. And so, it's much harder, would you agree with this? It's much harder to go out there and acquire a new client rather than getting your existing client to spend more with you, right? It's much more difficult to acquire those new clients. So today, I want to talk about, there's lots of ways that we can acquire new clients, but today I wanted to give you some food for thought as it relates to you utilizing your existing client base. So the people that are already bought into whatever service you provide, they know, like, and trust you. They value you as a service provider. How do we get them to either spend more or refer more, right? So we're going to talk about a number of ways today to help us do that. I'm very honored that you're here today to check this out. So you might be here today checking out this training because you're struggling with getting your existing clients to spend a little more money with you. Maybe they're at a particular base level with what you do, or maybe they're in that mid-tier range with the services that you provide and the cost that you're, not the cost, but the whatever price point you have them at. Maybe they're at a base level or a mid-tier level, and you'd like to see them get to that top tier level. So if you're in that boat and you're wanting to get your clients to spend more money with you, you're in the right spot. You also might be in the here today for the training because you actually want your existing clients or referral partners to refer you more quality clients. So there's this element of building your pipeline. Maybe the thought of going out there cold calling or pounding the pavement or polling on doors only to be greeted by the gatekeeper. If those thoughts don't sound really fun for you, and you would like to get more people to refer you business, then you're also in the right spot today. So I'm excited that we're going to get to have some training today. Another thing I want you to be thinking about if you're here today is to understand what you're going to need to do next. So maybe you're in this boat right now where, things are rocking and rolling on to some level, but you want to take it up a notch and you're not for sure what your next best steps are. You're a little frustrated because you can't seem to quite crack the that plateau, if you will, right? You know, you're at a certain level and you want to get to this next level, and you can see it, you just don't know how to get there. So you're in the right spot today. In fact, this whole training series is set up today in 3 parts, really 4 parts, I should say, to really help you leverage all of those or answer all of those questions and leverage the resources that you have. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started into what I want to share today with you, and that is, how do we assess or how do we increase the value of your clients? So let's dig right into today's topic. Now, as I said in my earlier opening remarks, I should say, there's really 2 ways that we can think about increasing the overall value of your current clientele, right? Number 1 is to retain them and get them to spend more with us. Again, you know, they might be, your current client base might be in a base level or mid-tier level, and we want to get them to that top tier level of spending. So what do we do? How do we get them to do that? So there's this retention aspect that I want to talk about today, and I have 2 points I want to share on that. And then we have the referral aspect. So your existing clientele or people that have worked with you in some way, shape, or form, maybe they haven't been exactly clients per se, but they've had some sort of experience with your service, and they can vouch for your expertise, and they can vouch for the level of service that you're giving, and they're more likely to give you a referral. So there's the retention aspect, like I mentioned. There's a couple of points I'm going to bring up in terms of making it really easy for people to refer you business. So let's dive in. I do have some notes here, so if I look down, I'm looking down at my notes to make sure that we get you the most resources today in the short amount of time that we have together, okay? So the number one way we can retain our existing clients is we've got to come up with maybe another idea to solve an additional problem they have. So for instance, one client might have come to you to solve problem A, B, C, and you've been able to do that with your particular service that you have right now, and perhaps maybe regardless of where that's at on the pay scale for you, you've been able to solve that problem for that client. Now, if it's something that you can't necessarily do on a repeatable basis, right? It's not something that you're constantly having to work with. Like, let me give you a perfect case and example. When I first launched my coaching business, I had this coaching program, right, where it was a 30-day coaching program. I don't offer it anymore because I know better, but it was a 30-day coaching program, and I offered 4 mini sessions in this 30-day program, and it was going to get them XYZ results, right? Well, what I was finding was that a lot of people already thought, okay, well, I'm working with Erica for 30 days and my life is going to change dramatically in 30 days and I don't need her help anymore after 30 days. Well, if you know your service and I know my service, sometimes, yes, we can certainly solve our problems, challenges with one service. You know, it's a one-off thing that we can do for our clients and they're happy as all get out. But you know, we don't necessarily want to do a one and done thing unless they're a terrible client. That's a whole different story for another day, right? But, you know, if you gain a client, remember I said in my opening remarks, it's much harder to go out there and attract new clients to our pipeline as opposed to getting our existing clients to, you know, buy into more services that are appropriate for them, right? So what is it about your current clients' problems or challenges that they have in the market space right now? What are some other challenges that you could help them solve? Is that something that you have another service or product that you could sell to them within your within the product line that you have? Or do you need to go back to the drawing board and create something to solve that client's problem? Another example of that is I was actually talking to a friend of mine who happens to be a financial wealth advisor, and she was talking about how she solves a lot of wealth challenges for busy professionals, helps them manage and mitigate their risk as it relates to managing their money. But one of the things that kept coming up in some conversations were that, even though these busy professionals, like they seem to have money, they seem to have, resources that need to be managed and whatnot, there are a lot of professionals that she's having conversations with that don't necessarily know how to budget. And so she thought, gosh, what if I created another program or an offering to help professionals who wanted to learn how to budget and get their ducks in the, and get all their ducks in a row so that they are mitigating their risk as it relates to investing and some of those other sophisticated things that I help them with. It's almost like step number one, right? Here she was like offering assistance and support in this one area, and she was able to identify another way to come in and add extra value, still get compensated for it, but add some additional value to her clientele. So that's another example of that. Another way to increase the lifetime value of your existing client is to make sure you have some sort of engagement campaign built into your marketing plan. So let me tell you what I mean. Back in the day when I used to work for a fairly large-sized regional chamber of commerce here in my neck of the woods, one of the things that we were identifying was that a lot of our members were coming in the door, but they were leaving just as fast, meaning that we were only able to keep them for 1 year. And remember, again, it's much harder to go out there and acquire new clients, in this case, new members. So we wanted to fix that. We wanted to come up with a way to engage and retain our existing membership. So one of the things that we devised as a team, it was something that I led, but one of the things that we devised was coming up with a specific engagement campaign. It was all done via email. It seems a lot harder than I'm making it sound, and it really isn't. It just takes you to put into your brain the logical flow of what your clientele is going through, right? So there should be, especially when you're bringing on a new client, there should be some sort of onboarding process, right? That first 30 to 60 or 90 days that client is your client. What are the things that you're doing constantly over and over and over again as you're bringing in those new clients? How can you onboard those clients, whether you're doing it via email, whether you're doing that via phone, whether you're doing that via your social media channels? So thinking about your engagement series, if you will, for your existing clientele. And within that engagement series, here's some other things to be thinking about as it relates to getting you in front of your customer. Because again, if you're building that relationship with your customer and your clientele, it's much harder for them to leave and go to your quote unquote competition, right? Because they have the know, like, and trust factor built in. You're constantly giving them a reason to touch base with you and to, continue to build that relationship. So there's a couple things on my notepad that I wanted to touch on as it relates to what could be in that engagement model. So number one, if you as the service provider or the business owner are going to events to grow your business, chances are the people that are in your current client book of business might want to take advantage of some of those events as well, those professional events, conferences, networking opportunities. So think about some of the events or some of the workshops or conferences that you're going to, and can you simply invite them? A super class move would be to go ahead and get them a ticket to that event. I'm not asking anybody to break the bank to buy, expensive tickets to things that are outside of their marketing budget, but you could think strategically about inviting your client base to things that are relevant to them as well. So if you're already going to a networking event, a workshop, a conference that you find that's going to help grow your business, and you happen to serve a professional clientele, that might be a smart move to get them out there connecting with you and adding some extra value because they're learning something or they're meeting new people that's going to affect their bottom line. So that's number one. Of course, Captain Obvious would be some sort of e-newsletter or some sort of, and I don't mean from a sense of, here, this is what's going on in our world, right? make sure that if you're going to provide some sort of e-newsletter, that it's going to have content that's relevant to your existing customer base, okay? So it could be a tip of the week campaign. I know another insurance agent that does this brilliantly. He's got he doesn't have an email list per se, right? He doesn't have an email management system that he keeps track of all this stuff, but he's got about 50 strategic partners that he aligns with that are referring him business. He's referring them business. And one of the things that he does to stay top of mind in their eyes is put out a weekly insurance tip. So it's something, again, that is an added value, that is informative, it's educational. He's usually telling a story about it. So what could you do in your industry? Could you do a similar thing? Could you, talk about a client that you recently helped and not pitch anybody in this email, but could you talk about a story and talk about a solution to solving that problem within that story and adding some extra value to your current client base? So making sure that you have a newsletter. So we talked about events, we talked about newsletters. Another thing to keep top of mind in front of your clients is to share additional resources. One of the things that I did recently, and this is probably about 1.5 years ago, was I started thinking about my existing client base, and a lot of my clients are service providers, business owners just like you who are watching this today. What I did was I started paying attention to some of the things that they were talking about, some of the other concerns that they had, the other problems that they need solved. And so what I did was I set up something called a Google alert for that word. So if they were talking about time management, that's a real easy example. But if they were talking about something that I know I could probably share an additional resource, I would put a Google alert together. This is super easy to do. You just, I could actually put in the comment section where you go set up the Google alert. I'll make sure that I do that inside the comment section of this video. But the Google alert, you can set up whatever keyword you want, and you can get this to come to your inbox once a day, once a week. But what will happen is the most relevant articles or the most relevant content that's online as it relates to that keyword phrase is going to come into your inbox. And you can quickly look at that article or that video or that resource. And if you feel like it would be something relevant for your specific customer or client, you might want to go ahead and send that article off to them. So that's one example of getting resources. Of course, you can certainly Google these things yourself, but how nice would it be to set up a few keywords in Google Alerts, and Google Alerts do the work for you, right? Send you content that's relevant for what you're searching for and ultimately with what your clients need help with, okay? So those are 2 tips I wanted to share on the retention side of things. Number 1, can you solve a problem and another problem for your client? And number 2, can you help them with some sort of, keep them engaged somehow? Invite them to an event, send them something educational, give them a resource that's going to help them in the future. Okay, so let's talk about referrals, because this actually comes up quite a bit in the conversations I have with business owners and service providers who want to fill their pipeline with quality clients, right? So referrals could simply mean, obviously, Captain Obvious would be new people that are coming into your pipeline. They're people that you could potentially serve that you haven't served before, right? So that would be another way to increase your overall book of business. Maybe it's not attributing to the client value, but how it does attribute to your client value in the greater scheme of things is now, if you have an additional client that you're working with, you can bring them in to a specific tier. Remember how we were talking earlier about how in your services and all the services that you provide, there's generally a base level, a mid-tier, and a top-level tier of investment that client is making with you. And so your referrals, if you can get people to think about referring you business in that mid to top tier, then you're already crossing off the possibilities of working in that base level. So it's going to go like this. So we want to think about, as it relates to referrals, first and foremost, we want to think about, are we easy to refer? Do people know, like they know how to refer you? Okay. So do you make it crystal clear what service you provide and who do you provide it for? If you're not really clear about that, if you're the type of person that goes into a networking situation and you say, well, I work for XYZ company and I do this and I do this and I do this and I can help a client with this, people are going to, like, their eyes are going to glaze over before too long. They want to have a clear-cut direction of where they need to refer you, right? So if you're accepting new clients, you've got to give people an opportunity to know who you serve and what problem you solve, okay? So your little bonus assignment for after this video is to really zero in on who you want as an ideal customer, okay? Because if you're taking anything and everything that's walking by, it's going to be very hard for you to be, because you're really going to be servicing and working so hard to service a number of different clients, and they may not necessarily be at that top tier level, right? If you're serving a bunch of people at that base level investment, your chances are you're probably doing a lot of work for that base level investment. You're not getting much return on your dollars for the time that you're spending. So we could think about, like, what problem do I really love solving? Who do I really love solving it for? What's the ideal spend that I want my client to spend with me? And there's no harm. There's no. I want you to empower yourself to say, you know what? I want to work with clients that are willing to invest X at level. Okay, so gone are the days of you having to work your face off to try to service a number of people when you really could be serving people that you ultimately want to serve. So identifying the number one problem you solve and who you solve it for. That way, whenever you encounter a person at a networking event, or you encounter somebody in your existing customer base, you encounter somebody that's a potential referral partner for you, you can rattle off exactly what you do as a reminder to those people that already know you, and of course, as just a nice, clean soundbite to people that want to get to know you. Does that make sense? So your bonus assignment after this video is to identify the number one problem you solve and who you solve it for, okay? So that's number one in the referral side of things. The other thing that I wanted to touch on today is to enhance the quality of your service. So right now, if you are wanting to increase the lifetime value of your clientele, and you've been offering the same thing, the same product level, the same service, the same whatever, and you've not done anything to invest in yourself, to add extra things into the product or service, if you will, if you haven't gone back to the drawing board and seen how you can save, maybe there's a high cost associated with producing whatever product or service you provide, right? So if you haven't gone back to the drawing board in a long time to see how you can save on your costs that it takes to produce that service. In the service-based world, a lot of the things that drive costs for us are, maybe the software, the software that we need to you get our clients' input. That could be a real expensive way for you to drive the cost up for your service. So if you're not shopping, if you're not thinking about how can you reduce the cost of how you're showing up and you're servicing those goods, or if you're not making additional investments in yourself, one of the things that I pride myself in is that I'm constantly going to conferences outside of my niche, outside of my state, to learn from some of the greatest. And every time I go to one of those conferences, not only have I made a financial investment, I've made a time investment, and I'm usually taking the information I'm learning at these conferences and workshops and implementing it at a level that's going to make sense. It's a trickle-down effect. So that, my friends, right there, if you want to increase the overall lifetime value of your clientele and you want more referrals in that realm, what are you doing to increase or enhance the level of service that you're providing? And on the flip side, what are you doing to reduce any cost? And I'm not talking about penny pinching either, right? You know, you definitely want to put a quality product out there, but are there ways that you can actually reduce the amount of cost that you're spending towards producing that service or that product? Okay, makes sense? So we have two things that we talked about today as it relates to getting referrals to help us increase our lifetime value of our client. Again, it's giving your clients a straight shoot answer to how they can refer you. So who do you serve? What problem do you solve? If you can rattle that off the tip of your tongue, it'll really help you be more effective in your communication and drive more quality referrals to your pipeline. And number two, enhance the quality of your service. So take that time to invest in additional training, not necessarily accreditations per se, but if it's training or a way for you to add extra value, and you can justify increasing the cost of your service because now there's an extra added value to what you're bringing to the table, then by all means do that. And then of course, look for ways that you can reduce the cost of what it's going to take to produce that service in the first place. The last thing I wanted to share with you today before we wrap up today's session is this element of getting past gatekeepers, okay? So as we're trying to think about ways to increase the overall value of our clientele, our book of business, we want to be mindful of our time, and there's a couple things I'm going to be sharing tomorrow as it relates to avoiding gatekeepers, cutting to the chase, getting straight to the point as it relates to getting to those decision makers who are ultimately going to take you up on your offer or what you have as a service provider. So, you know, we're thinking about increasing the lifetime value of our clientele. We also want to be mindful of how we're spending our time. So tomorrow we're going to be sharing on some in-depth tips on how we can really maximize the time that we're spending out there to drive leads into our pipeline. So that's all I have for you guys today. I hope you found this super helpful. I would love to know your biggest takeaway from today's training. So please feel free to put your comments of what your favorite tip was today in the comment section of this video. And then of course, join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We'll be back here again for the second session of the training, which is how to avoid those pesky gatekeepers as it relates to getting our service in front of our ideal clients. So thank you again for chiming in today. Until tomorrow, y'all, take care. Bye.